how does a city, as it grows and changes,
Mm.
how does it start seeing itself reflected?
Hmm.
And how does that reflection then maybe shape its own path forward?
That's a great question. And today we're diving into exactly that.
We're looking at Arad, right?
Mm,
Back in the Austro-Hungarian Empire days, 19th, early 20th century.
that's the one. And you, our listener, actually sent over some fantastic historical documents about Arad's development, especially focusing on its press. Really detailed stuff.
Yeah, amazing material. So our mission for this deep dive is, well, to unpack how Arad turning into this big urban industrial hub wasn't just reflected in its newspapers.
But was actually fueled by them.
Exactly, by this growing, more sophisticated newspaper scene. What does that tell us about, the society, the politics, the culture of the time?
It's a fascinating link. So where should we start? Maybe the bigger picture. What forces were sort of setting the stage for Arad's press?
Good idea. The macro stuff first.
Okay, well, on a broad level, you've got a few major things happening. The Enlightenment, obviously, with its focus on reason, knowledge sharing, that laid the groundwork for more public discussion, people wanting information.
Right, a general thirst for knowledge.
Hmm. And then after the Reformation and the Austro-Hungarian Compromise, you see this real social and economic development kicking off.
Which means?
A growing middle class, basically, bourgeois tastes, new needs, and definitely a bigger appetite for news, for culture, that sort of thing.
Okay, so more people, more money, more interest in the world around them. That definitely sounds like a solid base.
Absolutely. Then, crucially, you have technical advancements. Printing gets better, faster, cheaper.
Making newspapers more accessible, easier to produce in larger numbers.
Precisely. And finally, journalism itself starts to become, well, a real profession, with its own standards, its own practices emerging.
Okay, those are the big currents. But what about Arad specifically? Any unique local sparks that really lit the fire for its press?
Yeah, the documentation points to something really key. Arad getting the title of Royal Free City.
Royal Free City. What did that actually mean on the ground?
It meant more self-governance, certain economic perks granted directly by the monarch. It wasn't just symbolic, it really boosted civic pride and, importantly, attracted investment. It made Arad, well, special.
Ah, okay. So a real status symbol, but with tangible benefits. And the sources really hammer home this rapid growth, the industrial boom in Arad. Can you give us a sense of that pace? How fast was it all happening?
It was remarkably fast. Even after the 48 revolution during that Bach era, which was quite centralizing from Vienna, potentially stifling.
Right, trying to keep control.
Exactly. But Arad's economy just kept pushing forward. A huge moment was in 1850 when they abolished the internal customs borders within the empire.
Ah, so goods and money could move much more freely.
Bingo. That really opened the floodgates for investment, industry, transport, everything.
I can imagine suddenly doing business got a lot easier.
Totally. And then the train. 1858, the first train arrives. That was massive. It basically made Arad the starting point for the main railway line into Transylvania.
Wow, so Arad goes from being maybe a regional town to a key railway hub.
A major node in the network, yeah. And that just accelerated everything else. Industry, society, you name it.
And the money followed.
Oh, definitely. By the 1880s, Arad was a huge banking center. At one point, the documentation suggests it was the most important financial hub in Transylvania. We're talking significant capital reserves, big deposit numbers mentioned in the source.
That's impressive. So with all this capital, this new infrastructure, what kind of industries really put down roots?
The sources list quite a few specific examples, which is great. You've got the railway and brick factory Arad SA in 1868. Same year, the Arad SA Spirits Factory.
Okay, building materials and spirits, a solid start.
Uh-huh. Then 1869 brings the Arad Steam Mill and Sawmill SA, and also the Sessiony Mill SA. Oh, and you can't forget Honi Frigy's Bell Foundry, apparently the most important one in all of Hungary.
Bells, too. Quite a mix. Foundational industries, really.
Yeah, but a really big boost came in 1892 with the Weitzer Janos wagon factory and foundries setting up shop, moving from Graz. That was a major industrial leap.
Wagon factory.
Yeah.
So we're talking serious manufacturing capacity.
Absolutely. And get this. By 1908, Arad was home to the only car and bus factory in the entire kingdom. Marta, it was called.
The only one in the whole kingdom. That really says something about Arad's industrial ambition, doesn't it?
It really does. And all this growth, well, it must have totally changed how the city actually looked and felt, right?
Oh, completely. The physical transformation was huge. Public transport started surprisingly early, 1869.
Wow.
Yeah, a modern water and sewage system in 1896. They even got gas street lighting back in 1860. And then you see this wave of big, important public buildings going up, symbols of the city's new status.
Like what kind of buildings?
Well, there's the new theater in 1874, then the new town hall in 77, very grand, apparently, and the Arad United Railway Palace, which sounds impressive just from the name.
Yeah, it does.
The Statue of Liberty was unveiled in 1890, and by 1896, that main square and Andrassy Square Revolution Boulevard today, most of the big buildings around it were done.
You can just picture it, the city getting this modern, quite imposing look.
Totally. Then the Central Roman Catholic Church was consecrated in 1903. The Kossuth statue went up in 1909. More landmarks solidifying that identity. And the capstone, maybe, was the Cultural Palace in 1913, eclectic style.
A real centerpiece.
The whole city center was getting a facelift Art Nouveau, eclectic buildings popping up. And they even started paving and asphalting the main streets, getting properly modern.
It sounds like Arad was really consciously building itself into a significant European city. So with all this happening, the economy booming, the city physically changing, the cultural and intellectual side must have been buzzing too.
Oh, absolutely. It grew right alongside everything else. The source makes a big point about the region's first political newspaper launching in 1861. Alfold, it was called.
Alfold. That's a key moment, isn't it? Signaling this growing need for, well, political talk, public discussion.
Definitely. Then you get the main Royal Gymnasium, established in 1873, a big step for education.
And this newspaper, Alfold, you said it was political, so it wasn't just reporting news, right? Did it take sides? How did it, try to influence things?
Good question. It definitely had a stance. It was pro-Diak faction, pushing for a return to older laws, the 1848 laws, basically arguing for a certain vision of Hungarian statehood within the empire. So, yeah, absolutely shaping the debate.
Okay, so actively partisan.
Seems so. And the intellectual scene kept growing. The Kolkzi Association, founded in 1881, like a cultural club. And that same year, the first issue of another daily paper, Arad is Fidek.
Right, Arad and its region.
Then not long after, 1885, another daily appears, Aradi Kozloni.
Wow. So in just a couple of decades, Arad goes from basically 0 political dailies to, what, 3 major ones competing?
Pretty much. And education kept expanding too. The commercial high school opened in 1891, and a huge cultural marker.
Yeah.
The city theater got elevated, became a national theater with 2 permanent troupes.
2 troops, like drama and opera.
Exactly. That really speaks volumes about Arad's cultural ambitions, doesn't it? Saying, we're a serious cultural player.
No kidding. A national theater status.
Yeah.
That's a big statement for a city like Arad.
And things were really humming by the time World War I approached. You look at the civil society, the source lists 18 cafes, 12 hotels, 7 air brothels.
Huh. Okay, covering all bases then.
And over 200 theater performances a year. People at the time were calling Arad bohemian by 1910.
Bohemian, really? In a provincial Austro-Hungarian city, that paints quite a picture. It suggests, I suppose, a real diversity of social life, different groups wanting different things. Not just basic needs, but entertainment, social spaces.
Yeah, a sign of a complex, maturing city. So all these things coming together, the money, the buildings, the culture, it must have changed the people living there profoundly.
Absolutely. Huge social shifts were happening, and they directly fed into Arad becoming this media hub. Literacy rates, for instance, big jump, from about 47% in 1880 to almost 70% by 1910.
Wow, nearly 70%. That's a massive increase.
And the intelligentsia, the intellectual class, grew significantly too, both in number and as a percentage of the population.
Right, so way more people who could read, and a growing group specifically interested in ideas, news, culture, a ready-made audience for papers.
Exactly, and just the sheer number of people is exploding. The source gives figures maybe 15,000 in 1830. By the last Hungarian census, over 63,000 in the city proper, nearly 78,000 if you include the surrounds.
That's incredible growth, a real population boom.
Huge influx, and it wasn't a homogenous population either, very diverse ethnically. In 1910, you had the large Hungarian group, sure, but also significant numbers of Romanians, Germans, Swabians, they're often called Serbs, Slovaks, others too.
And how do they all get along?
Well, the source notes that after the tensions around 1848, things settled into a period of generally peaceful coexistence. Crucially, each nationality had its own cultural institutions, its own spaces.
Okay, so a large, diverse, increasingly literate population in a rapidly growing city, Sounds like, well, perfect soil for a newspaper industry to grow.
It was textbook conditions, really, and local business people saw the opportunity. They jumped in to meet this growing demand for news, for information. This created a really competitive environment, capitalist, you know. The source even calls Arad a bastion of the provincial press,
A bastion. That's strong language.
but probably justified. The number of journalists, printers, press workers grew a lot. Arad apparently had more journalists than other similar-sized cities nearby,
Interesting.
and the printing presses themselves, not just more of them, but technologically advanced for the time. Arad was really leading the way provincially in printing tech. Circulation numbers were high, too, compared to national levels, and even just for the city's population size.
So Arad wasn't just reading papers. It was a major production center. Now, why were the Hungarian newspapers so successful there specifically?
Several things lined up. After the Austro-Hungarian Compromise, the Hungarians held the main political and economic power in that part of the empire. So Hungarian naturally became the main language for public life. Business, the lingua franca, essentially.
Okay, it makes sense.
Plus, the Hungarian-speaking population itself was growing steadily, and readership was especially high among the Hungarian and German middle classes, the bourgeoisie. And as we said, literacy and education levels overall were rising.
So you had a growing target audience who could speak the language, afford the papers, and were keen to read them.
Pretty much. And the papers themselves were getting better, more diverse.
Yeah, that diversification is striking. It wasn't just politics. You had specialist papers, magazines for social groups, religious ones, school papers, even tabloids and comics.
Right. And literary journals, theater reviews, satirical stuff, even these can publications mentioned, whatever they were exactly, catering to all sorts of tastes.
A real spectrum. But the political papers were the big influencers.
Yeah, they seem to have had the most direct impact on local politics, public life, often tied to specific parties, but they covered more than just politics. National news, local news, obviously. But also short stories, bits of novels, the source says, they helped shape literary tastes.
That's interesting, fostering literature through the daily paper.
Mm-hmm. Economic sections were important too. Theater criticism was apparently quite demanding, quite serious, and they ran editorials, which wasn't common for provincial papers then. It shows ambition, wanting to lead opinion.
They really saw themselves as more than just news sheets.
Definitely. They even copied the Budapest papers by doing Sunday editions, bigger holiday issues, adding more pages to meet demand, and the whole operation became more professional. More journalists, specialized roles like editors, assistant editors. Some journalists even sat on the city council.
Wow, blurring the lines a bit there, maybe.
Perhaps. But it shows their integration into the city's power structures. Editorial offices got telegraphs, telephones, they were connected, getting news quickly from the capital and elsewhere.
Staying up to the minute.
They even sent reporters out to cover big events, writing and editing through the night to get the news out fast. The documents suggest the big Arad papers were actively trying to beat the Budapest press to the punch on news delivery.
Trying to scoop the capital's papers from Arad.
Yeah, and apparently they sometimes managed it, which tells you a lot about their drive, their resources.
Yeah.
They weren't content being just a regional echo.
That's incredible. Real ambition. So let's get into some of these specific papers. Where does the story start, newspaper-wise, in Arad?
Okay, the very first permanent paper seems to be the Arader Kundschaftsblatt from 1837. German language, it focused on local stuff, news, ads, theater times, who was staying at the hotels.
Hotel guest lists. Seriously.
Yep, different times. It was printed in Gothic script initially, but interestingly, started including more Hungarian articles in the 1840s, right up to 1849. Shows the linguistic shift happening. There were other German papers after that, too.
And the first Hungarian one, when did that appear?
That was Azaradi Tudakozo Intézet Magyar Hírlapja in 1839. Bit of a mouthful.
Just a bit.
It translates roughly to the Hungarian language journal of the Information Institute of Arad. It was actually run by the same guy as the German paper, Franz Schwester. Basically the Hungarian version. It changed names a few times, eventually became Aradi Hirdető, an important early step.
Okay. And then the overtly political papers.
They burst onto the scene during the 1848 revolution. You had Arad and Patriot, but the revolution's failure meant they were shut down pretty quickly by mid-1849.
Ah, short-lived then.
Yeah. There was another attempt later, Aradi Hirado, but the real game changer was Alfold, starting in 1861.
Alfold, the Great Plain. This sounds like the one that really made its mark first.
It really did. Getting it started wasn't easy. They were denied permission in Arad at first, so initially printed it in Vienna.
Wow, dedication.
But it quickly became super influential, backed by big local names. And like we touched on, it had a clear political line pro-Diak, wanting a return to the 1848 laws, that specific view of Hungary's place.
Which probably got them into trouble sometimes.
Definitely faced censorship. Its peak influence was under editor Tisti Lajos. He pushed for progress, reforms, and interestingly tackled the nationality issues, especially regarding the Romanians.
So, engaging with the multicultural reality.
Seems so. But despite being hugely important, especially up to the 1880s, it eventually faded due to competition and editorial changes, closing after 37 years. Still a massive legacy.
It really set the stage for political journalism there. So after Elfold started to fade, what came next?
Well, Arad Esfidek, Arad and its region, launched Christmas Day 1880, and it took off fast.
What was its angle?
It backed the Independence Party, the 48 Ideals, but its real strength was focusing intensely on local news, city development. It championed local causes, the Kulksi Association, fundraising for a Kossuth statue, pushing for an ethnographic museum, even proposing a university, and it promoted local figures.
Very rooted in the city itself.
Absolutely. They explicitly saw Budapest papers as the standard to aim for, added a subtitle later, Political, Social, and Economic Daily, reflecting its broad scope. Got top writers, covered arts, music really well, known for sharp theater reviews.
Sounds comprehensive.
And there were innovators, too. Used electric printing, graphics, tried to get readers involved. It survived World War I, but declined afterwards, closing after 42 years. Remembered for being broad, high quality, really mirroring that Budapest ambition.
And a real heavyweight paper for the city. And the third big one, Aradi Kazlani.
Aradi Kazlani, a Raider Gazette, started December 1885, founded by Josef Stauber. Its whole thing was objective reporting, staying within, good taste, high professional standards.
It's maybe less overtly partisan than the others.
It seems it shifted a bit. Supported the Liberal Party first, then went neutral, then back to the National Labor Party, so maybe more pragmatic politically. But known for quality contributions, economics, theater, again, even original fiction.
It's fiction in the daily paper. Interesting.
Yeah. And they did unique local things, like a charity drive, providing bread for the poor, offering accident insurance for subscribers. Festive supplements, too, had famous authors writing for them. And it introduced the first weekly cartoon section in Transylvania, quite forward-thinking.
Cartoons. That's cool.
Consistently backed local modernization, had a stable editorial team, which probably helped, and incredibly, it lasted the longest. Survived WWI, the whole interwar period, only closed in October 1940.
Why then?
Politics. World War II context. Hungarian papers were banned in southern Transylvania after northern Transylvania was annexed by Hungary. So external factors finally killed it after 55 years.
55 years. That's an amazing run, especially through such turbulent times.
Yeah.
It really must have been woven into the fabric of the city.
For sure. Its longevity tells you something. So yeah, you had these three big competing dailies, each with its own flavor, a really vibrant scene.
And it wasn't just them, right? There were others.
Oh yeah, loads of others. More specialized weeklies, social papers, arts magazines, satirical ones, sports papers, even things focused just on tourism or advertising. The variety is just staggering. Really shows how dynamic the press scene was.
It really does. But we also need to talk about the Romanian press, which the source highlights as important too.
Absolutely crucial. Can't understand Arad without it. The Romanian language press there wasn't just numerous, it was high quality and played a massive role in Romanian national identity building. Some key figures involved later became major players in the 1918 Great Union movement.
So really politically significant.
Hugely. Between 1862 and 1918, the source lists at least 14 Romanian papers and magazines in Arad. You had major political dailies like Tribuna Poporului, which became Tribuna, and later Romanul. These were really central to the Romanian national cause, featuring top writers and thinkers.
And beyond the main political ones.
Other important ones included Biserica Iacăuală, Church and School. That one actually holds the record as the longest-running magazine in Arad, period. Plus other political, satirical, economic papers serving the Romanian community.
It really underscores that multi-ethnic reality of Arad, doesn't it? A complex media landscape serving different communities side by side.
Exactly. You have to see it in that full context.
So if you step back and look at Arad's whole press scene in this era, what's the big takeaway? What defined it?
Well, the documents really show a press that was incredibly rich, very engaged with public life, with civic issues, sensitive to social questions, national questions. There was this underlying belief in progress, in development. And generally, the standards were really high.
Compared to other places.
Yeah, the political and public affairs papers in Arad were seen as among the best in the whole region, often compared favorably to papers in bigger cities, and, as we said, even trying to match the quality and speed of the Budapest press.
Quite an achievement for a provincial city.
Definitely. And even though World War I obviously hit hard, the press structure that existed in 1919 was strong, ready for whatever came next.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, it's really clear Arad's press in the 19th and early 20th century wasn't just like holding up a mirror to the city's growth.
No, it was an active player,
Yeah.
shaping identity, pushing agendas, reflecting, but also driving change.
Fueled by that economic boom, the social shifts, this buzzing intellectual climate, the sheer number of papers, the quality, the competition, it just paints this picture of a really dynamic place.
And I think what's particularly striking as you look through the material is just how many papers there were for a city of its size. It wasn't the capital, right?
Right.
But the density of the media landscape is impressive. And that detail about them sometimes scooping the Budapest papers, that really sticks with you. It speaks to their ambition, their connection, their capability.
It really does. It's another fantastic reminder of how focusing on a specific local story, like Arad's Press, can unlock these surprising insights into much bigger historical processes. So hopefully you've gained another valuable shortcut to being well-informed, maybe you picked up some unexpected facts along the way.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about Arad's incredibly rich press history during that period of huge change, how does today's digital media revolution compare, in its impact on how a city develops, its civic life?
Hmm. What's similar? What's totally different?
Exactly. Are there echoes of Arad's experience in how online news, social media shape our communities now? Or are the differences more fundamental, something
Ugh.
to definitely mull over?